Welcome to RHI's Sociable City interviews, where we meet with the global thought leaders on nightlife and the social economy. Today we are here with Dominique Greco, founder and executive director, Orlando Hospitality Alliance, and the former Orlando Nighttime Economy Manager.
Hey, Dominique, how you doing today?
Hey Jim, how are you?
Good, good. Well, I'm delighted that we're able to have this conversation. I've been really impressed with the work you've done over all these years, ever since we first met. And I thought maybe we could just give people a background, like how did you, before you started as the nighttime economy manager, what were you doing? How did you end up in that position?
Yeah, great. Well, I've been in hospitality pretty much my entire career since I'm about 15 or 16 years old, working at Panera Bread. And then leading up to the nighttime economy manager position, fast forwarding, some years in there, worked for Marriott, worked for my mentor, current mentor, Jeff Gito, who is a downtown Orlando hospitality portfolio operator. Started working for him at a young age and kind of did a lot of different roles within nightlife and hospitality and restaurants. So leading up to the to 2017, when the city of Orlando brought about this nighttime economy manager position, I was working right nearby in downtown Orlando for an entrepreneur that had at the time 11 nightclubs.
Okay, so you have an extensive background in multi-unit operations. A lot of
Too.
small independent venues too, right? There's not really large chains, but more your regional connection among businesses. So
Yeah, mostly.
I was there on the day that you were suddenly announced as the nighttime economy manager. So at that moment, what was your impression of what the job was going to be? Because obviously you applied for it, but
Mhm.
you didn't expect to be on the spot at that moment, told that you have the job. What were you thinking it was going to be?
Ugh, I don't know if I know exactly in that moment. That moment was like really shocking. But then as the weeks and months went by leading up to like actually starting with the city of Orlando, I and through interviews and conversations with my newly becoming boss at the time, it was an advocate, it was a spokesperson, it was someone who they wanted someone specifically who did come from the industry and knew how to speak the language with entrepreneurs and with small business operators, because that's particularly what downtown Orlando has in terms of hospitality, and knew had a trust factor there, a local interest and a real interest. So when I took the job, it was definitely because I wanted to advocate for this segment of the industry, and I wanted to, do my part to bring them together. Because oftentimes there's a perception that they're a little disjointed or unorganized. So I looked at myself as a liaison, and that is definitely how the city of Orlando also, um, you know, rolled out that position, was in that spirit.
Well, you're part of, back at the time, there was very few people who had this role. And so nobody really had a clear job description. So in a way, you are creating the job that other people can now copy. But what would you say some of the highlights, the things that when you rolled up your sleeves and you got to work, what were some of the highlights of what you feel you accomplished?
We brought about a pilot program with Uber and Lyft back in 2018 or so, where we piloted a city organized, ride share hub situation for our downtown entertainment district, which was and still kind of is busting at the seams in terms of the grid and the traffic coming in and out, both vehicular and pedestrian. So we had a lot of issues on our hands in terms of concentration, and to try to diffuse that, we did a series of different, very, tactical rearranging, if you will, of how the downtown flowed at the time. And so Uber and Lyft, the joint partnership between Uber and Lyft at the time was really exciting, because obviously getting those two competitors to participate in something organized at the local level was part of the win, but also it did the trick for what we were going for in downtown, and gave people a sense of organized distribution, and they were more simply able to get in and out of downtown at that time.
Mm. Now, you took your job within a short period of time after the Pulse nightclub shooting.
Yeah.
And so this really generated a lot of questions, I'd imagine, in terms of how the venues and how the police and others were going to work together. What did you do to help facilitate some of that dialogue?
I brought the good ideas from the industry, from the community. These entrepreneurs may or may not think or actually have the platform or the be at the table, so to say, to contribute their suggestions, their hands-on suggestions. And so that gets lost in the shuffle. And I think that I made it a point to really go diving for those and then bring them back to decision makers at the city level and really push, where I could to be heard about the reality versus what, what you want to write on paper. And those two things need to jive.
So when you talk with other night managers, I know there's a new group form called Nightcap, which is the Association of Night Managers. What are the more common challenges that they all seem to be facing in this job and in this role? And what can you relate to?
Well, one part is something I just mentioned, getting the community, the members, the stakeholders of this industry or of your entertainment district or whatever boundary you're trying to get them to come together and believe in the system that they may or may not feel, slighted by over the years of dealing with different issues that they've had with maybe their city or their county or their state departments. So getting them to buy into that this is something for them and this is a pathway towards that collaboration that we really need for any industry to be successful in any part of this country. I think that it does take a collaboration between industry and officials, regulatory or enforcement or otherwise. So that's really the ongoing part of the job that you have to start off strong with. You have to keep on it all the time, and you can never back off of that because there's always new businesses coming and going. There's different problems coming and going. So having your stakeholders have a really open door policy and be able to reach you at any time is a big important part.
Your structure is different than, say, New York and DC, where it's been legislated, or like in Pittsburgh or San Francisco, where it's built into a city administration, whether it be the public safety office or the Office of Film and Music. But you're kind of built, or your position, or the nighttime economy position, is kind of built into a quasi business improvement, community development structure, which doesn't necessarily encompass the whole city, but is more focused just on downtown. So how do you see that structure differ from your peers? And which would you see or is a more effective model? Is that what you would advocate for?
It's such a tricky question, and we go back and forth about this. My colleagues in Nightcap that you mentioned, the Nighttime Economy Manager organization that got started last year, it was such a double-edged sword because being part of a community redevelopment agency, I had access to a different fund of money from a TIF tax specifically for that geographical footprint in which my department sat, which was downtown Orlando. And for Orlando, that is really where a very big chunk, if you will, of our entertainment districts are in downtown. There are others, but that was really the mecca. So it was good in a way because I had money to be able to pull off different programs and pilots and market for them and collateral, and et cetera. But like I said, I go back and forth, but not being maybe in the mayor's office or being a policy, advisor, technically speaking, I didn't have a lot of authority. So there was a lot of layers of internal, work that needed to be done just to get one thing off the ground. And I mean, I guess that would be the case with any nighttime economy manager, but I think we definitely found ourselves running into problems because I didn't have a staff, I didn't have an external communications platform, and I didn't have an authority to pull off certain things that really needed to coincide to make any program successful.
You're a part of launching, and you're the founding executive director of the Orlando Hospitality Alliance. So what motivated you to kind of leave as the nighttime economy manager, which I understand was just somebody had just taken your position, to form this hospitality alliance? What motivated you? What do you feel you'll be able to do through this alliance or association that you weren't able to do within your other job?
But on the heels of COVID at the time when I did leave the city about 10 months ago now, I think there was some burnout that went into it, being a staff of one and being the liaison for an industry that at the time was not being heard, more so than ever. And there was all other types of problems that were drowning out that. And I really did pull my bootstraps up and double down through that entire year. But then when I realized that I think that I actually would be more successful in advocating for this community that I am so passionate about, that I know so well, that I know doesn't get the airtime or the positive, accolades that they deserve, then it became all clear kind of at once, one of life's epiphanies, that I was like, oh, I can actually do this, but better, without being a city official, perhaps. And that's for me personally. I think that the city of Orlando still does have a nighttime economy manager. He's a friend of mine. He's a huge, great advocate for this industry. But I think for me, Dominique, as the person, that the better fit was for me to come out and do what I'm doing now, which is open the Orlando Hospitality Alliance.
So you see his role as still almost kind of working within the city, and your role is bringing the interests, like you said before, that weren't heard following the Pulse shooting, bringing those interests to the discussion. So the nighttime economy manager would serve as, again, the liaison between the alliance you're forming and the government entities that need to be at the table. Now, Orlando, when you say it to most people, they think Disney World, Universal Studios, conventions at the big hotels, but they don't always think about the downtown Orlando. And from a entertainment perspective, So I know when we talked previously, the reason you're doing this alliance is it's for the more local independent businesses that would be based in a downtown environment like Orlando, versus the large occupancy chains that are splattered all throughout the convention area of Orlando. So is that really what you see as a gap, not only in Orlando, but in other cities?
100%, definitely. We have great state and local organizations that do a really great job of taking in TDT dollars, which is our bed tax dollars, and putting that back out to ensure that the tourism experience, is top priority at a state and local level. And however, because we're so tourism centric and big box and Marriott, Hilton, the big guys, Disney and Universal, as you mentioned, often I've seen, and for the last 10 years really, and beyond, way beyond my time, but I'll say for myself, for the last 10 years, there isn't that carve out for the small business side of things. So the Orlando Hospitality Alliance aims to fill that gap, and for the local and social community, and that is really about improving the entrepreneur experience in Central Florida, and bringing them together to do that work, and to tell all the good work that goes into this as a whole segment of the industry, because they've been a little disjointed, and that's one thing I feel really strongly about, is bringing that together and being able to tell the story on behalf of hundreds, if not thousands, hopefully, of small businesses that make up the culture that we have outside of International Drive and Universal and Disney, as you said, Jim. Because over here on this other side of town, we have not only downtown Orlando, which is, like I said earlier, our kind of mecca nightlife entertainment district, but we have easily 15 other named entertainment districts just in a 20-mile radius, 30-mile radius, and kind of new ones always popping up, very often. So there's tons to eat and drink. Orlando's such a foodie city, and it has such a cool craft beer, craft cocktail scene as well. And that is the part of the industry that I want to focus on.
if you're successful, and we were to have this discussion 18 months from now, how do you think people are going to be socializing differently? I mean, we have a lot of changes that have happened, but how do you see the industry changing and the way in people socialize, in 18 months from now?
With Orlando Hospitality Alliance coming online, I hope to see a bigger push for that, eat small, shop small, drink small, local, and keep our local residents informed of what's new, what's happening, who's a member, who's doing philanthropy, who's hiring, who all of these things, and keep it to a circular economy, and spend our money right here where we eat, where we live and work and all of that. On a broader picture, I think, again, with COVID hopefully in the rearview mirror to an extent, I see people socializing in a little bit more of an organized fashion. And I think that bookings and shows and ticketed events and will continue to be something that people are they're more prepared to plan a little bit more in advance, whereas hospitality, the social economy has and always will, be very spontaneous. But I do think that ticker is just going to continue to tick a little bit more towards that pre-planning and pre-booking.
Good insight. Good insight. I never thought about it like that. Well, do you have any final words that you want to say, or this has been a great and thoughtful interview. You certainly have a lot of experience, and it seems you're going to cover all the bases.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, check out OrlandoHospitalityAlliance.org and help get our name out there. And thank you so much, Jim. I really appreciate it.
All right, no problem.